Hi guys, I'm Saumya and how are you? I am back again with another video. I hope you are all well and safe. I make a lot of bookish content on this channel and please do subscribe to my channel if you are a book lover because I will really appreciate that. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about how I started reading classics, or you can also say that I'll tell you how you can read classics. So now one thing that I want to make very clear right at the outset of this video is that you do not need to read classics to be a reader. But this video is for those people who want to explore classics, so let's get started. So the first thing that you need to keep in mind is that it would be better if you are already a reader when you start reading classics. Now this may seem super obvious, but trust me, it's not. I know people in my personal life who started their reading journey by picking up something like Hamlet by William Shakespeare, and they were not able to get into it, and after 2 days of reading that they were like, oh my god, reading is not for me. So you see what I'm trying to say. The thing is, when you are already reading contemporary fiction or even non-fiction, you are already in that vibe of being a reader. So when you move to classics, it's not a very heavy transition. But if you are not a reader and you begin your reading journey by reading classics, then that can really discourage you. So don't do that. So read contemporary fiction or non-fiction first and then move on to classics. That would be my first advice. So my second advice would be that you can start reading classics by first reading the abridged versions of different classics. Abridged versions of classics are basically those versions that are condensed, and also the language in these versions is way easier, but you still get to read the entire story. I mean, at least the gist of it. Like, for the most part, you know what the story is. So that is a huge help when you move on to the original version. So if you read the abridged version first and then move on to the original version, what happens is that you already know the story. So at least in terms of the story, you can understand what's happening and you can keep up. And when it comes to the language, because you already understand the story, the language becomes less challenging. This has been my personal experience. This is how I started reading a lot of classics. I started reading the abridged versions first when I was like, I think 12 or 13. This is how I began. But even if you are towards the older side, you can still start with this process because it is actually very beneficial. Now the third way to go about it is that if you do not want to read abridged versions of classics and if you want to read the original versions of classics but you still find them difficult, then go for the easier classics, right? That's another way. Go for the easier classics whose original versions are not that difficult. If you want to find out about some of these classics that are easy to read, then I've made a video recommending such classics and you'll find that in the cards or in the description box. You can check that one out for recommendations. So basically the point here is to go from easy to hard. Start by reading easier classics and then develop your grip along the way, and as your grip on the language, as your command on the language of these classics gets stronger, move on to the harder classics. The next point is for those people who really want to read classics. So I want you to know what to expect. So expect that reading classics can seem like work, because in all honesty, in the initial stages, it is work because the language is difficult, the sensibilities are different, and also classics are way slower than other books. The thing is that when you know this already and when you pick up classics with this knowledge, then they don't seem like a challenge because you already know what to expect. This is exactly what had happened with me in case of Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte many years ago. So it took me quite a long time to finish that book, but at the end of it I did finish it because right from the start I knew that it was going to be a long time and that I will finish it. I did. I faced a lot of challenges with the language, with the story as well, but at the end of it, when I closed that book, I had understood everything, and it was a very challenging journey, but I loved it in the end. I didn't love the story though. I just loved the fact that I finished it. I didn't like the story of Wuthering Heights that much, but that's another topic entirely. So expect that it can be a long process, but in the end, you will feel good about it once you finish your first classic successfully. So the next thing that you really need to know is that just like any other genre, classics is also that category of books that you need to explore to be able to find out which kind of classics work for you, which author works for you. For example, Jane Austen and Agatha Christie are two authors that really work for me. I just love their writing style. I love their stories, and you can just say that when I read books by them, it makes everything better for me. I mean, that's just the impact of those books on me, and they're classics. So it takes some time for you to discover what really works for you, but once you get there, it's amazing. The next thing I want to tell you is that once you start reading classics, either of the two things can happen. Either you'll really get into classics and the vibe that they give and you would want to explore more, or you might get tired and you might feel like giving up, in which case I want to say that it's totally fine. If you're not able to get into classics after reading a few of them, then drop classics for the time being. Explore other books, contemporary fiction or non-fiction, and then you can revisit classics after a few years. There are many factors that contribute to what we like or not. Our external circumstances, our mindset, all of that. And sometimes you're just not ready to read classics. Sometimes you're not. And this applies to a lot of other things, be it music, movies, and you can revisit certain things later on in your life. So keep that in mind as well. Ultimately, I want to say that personally, I love classics, and that's why I have made this video, because my experience of reading classics has been wonderful. This was my video of giving you tips on how you can begin reading classics. I hope you found it useful. If you want to connect with me on my social media, the links are in the description. I'll see you in my next video. Till then, bye bye, take care and stay safe.